I tested 5 luxury perfume brands women keep being told are investment scents, and the most uncomfortable result was not that some of them performed badly. It was how quickly the illusion collapsed once the bottle left the counter. One fragrance cost $405 for 50 milliliters, and gave me a glamorous opening that barely survived dinner. Another cost $470 for 75 milliliters, and smelled expensive in the air but strangely generic on skin by hour 4. A third asked $335 for 100 milliliters and had all the cool girl authority in the world, until I realized half the room already smelled like some version of it. I wore them on clean skin, on moisturized skin, on scarves, inside warm cars, through errands, through restaurant lighting, through cold air, and through that ruthless final test. The next morning, when marketing has no place left to hide. File this away now. Luxury is not what a bottle says in the first 10 minutes. Luxury is what remains when nobody is trying to impress you anymore. This test matters because the perfume industry has learned something very profitable about women with taste. It knows you do not want to be sold sweetness in a pink bottle and treated like you have no memory. It knows you have moved past the cheap tricks. So now it sells you restraint, rarity, quiet wealth, heritage, niche credibility, French minimalism, private collection language, and bottles that look beautiful enough to justify almost anything. But the bargain is often insulting. Pay more, receive less perfume. Call the thinness elegance. Call the weakness skin scent. Call the lack of development modern. You have felt this. You sprayed something at a counter and thought, there it is. That's the woman I want to smell like. And then 3 hours later it had become a faint, expensive suggestion clinging to your sleeve like it was embarrassed to be there. Remember this too. Some brands are not selling you fragrance. They are renting you an identity for the first hour. Creed is positioned as old-world prestige for people who want perfume to feel inherited rather than purchased. Women reach for it because the name carries that whisper of royal warrants, hand-polished counters, Mayfair mythology, and the idea that a Creed bottle is not a trend but a bloodline. Creed Carmina is $470 for 75 milliliters, and on paper it should be exactly the kind of dark, polished floral that flatters a grown woman's intelligence. Black cherry, pink pepper, saffron, violet, rose, peony, cashmere wood, amber, musk, and myrrh. The opening is plush. It has a red velvet quality, not sugary red, but lacquered red, like a lipstick pressed onto a linen napkin in a hotel bar where the lighting forgives nobody. What it does well is entrance. It feels composed, dressed, expensive, and very aware of the room. Then the catch arrives, and it is not a small one. For $470 for 75 milliliters, the fragrance does not give enough after the performance of the opening. The cherry and spice begin with drama, but the dry down smooths into a pretty ambered floral that could be wearing a much less intimidating label. The counter will sell you lineage. Your skin may receive polish without enough pulse. And when a house charges this much for mythology, the scent itself has to do more than arrive well. Tom Ford is positioned as adult danger, the brand women reach for when they want perfume to feel expensive, private, and a little inappropriate in the best possible way. It understands lighting. It understands black lacquer. It understands that many women do not want to smell innocent. They want to smell intentional. Tom Ford Lost Cherry is $405 for 50 milliliters, and the first spray is almost indecently persuasive. Black cherry liqueur, bitter almond, rose, jasmine sambac, tonka, vanilla, cinnamon, clove, sandalwood, vetiver, and a syrup dark fruitiness that feels like a dessert you should not order in public, but absolutely would, in a room with red walls. What it does well is seduction at impact. It makes a fast argument. It knows how to turn heads in the first 20 minutes. Then the hard truth comes in. The name promises decadence, but the wear can become flatter than the price allows, with the cherry burning bright and then retreating into a warm, sweet haze that does not always hold its shape. The counter will tell you it is sensual. I will tell you sensuality is not the same as a beautiful opening followed by an expensive disappearance act. Notice the pattern already. The first minutes are luxurious, but the hours are where the bill starts looking rude. Byredo is positioned as taste without effort, perfume for women who want to seem modern, edited, and impossible to corner. It is the brand of clean typography, pale woods, white walls, art books, and emotional distance arranged as a lifestyle. Byredo Mojave Ghost is $320 for 100 milliliters, and the profile is deliberately airy: ambrette, Jamaican nesberry, violet, sandalwood, magnolia, ambergris, cedar, and musk. On skin, it opens like warm dust over pale fruit, then turns into a sheer floral wood with a soft mineral edge, The kind of scent that makes you think of sun on expensive cotton and a woman who never has receipts in her handbag. What it does well is atmosphere. Byredo can build a mood faster than almost anyone, and Mojave Ghost has that dry, drifting elegance that feels tasteful without raising its voice. But then we have to talk about value, because mood is not a performance metric. At $320 for 100 milliliters, too many Byredo fragrances ask you to pay full luxury pricing for a watercolor. Beautiful, yes. Memorable, sometimes. Substantial, not always. The counter will call it ethereal. Sometimes ethereal is just the polite word for thin. Labo is positioned as anti-luxury luxury, which may be the most profitable trick of all. It tells you it is not trying too hard while charging exactly like a brand that knows how hard it is trying. Labo Santal 33 is $335 for 100 milliliters, and the scent profile is now burned into the cultural wallpaper. Sandalwood, cedarwood, cardamom, iris, violet, leather, papyrus, amber, and musk. At its best, it smells like dry wood, clean skin, old paper, and a leather bag left near a window in late afternoon. What it does well is silhouette. You recognize it instantly, and there is power in that. A woman who wore it before it became everywhere probably remembers the first time it felt sharp, strange, and private. But ubiquity is not a minor flaw when the brand is selling individuality. The other problem is skin chemistry. On some women it turns creamy and cool. On others it tilts sour, briny, even pickle-like, and nobody at the counter is going to say that while wrapping the bottle in tissue. File this away. Recognizability can feel like identity until everyone recognizes it on someone else. Then it becomes uniform. Jo Malone is positioned as civilized prettiness, the brand women reach for when they want fragrance to feel clean, graceful, and appropriate in almost every room. It is wedding guest perfume, office perfume, brunch perfume, beautiful bathroom perfume, the scent equivalent of fresh flowers in a pale ceramic vase. Jo Malone Peony and Blush Suede is $165 for 100 milliliters, and the profile is easy to love. Red apple, peony, jasmine, rose, gillyflower, and a soft suede accord that smooths the florals into something tender and polished. What it does well is charm. It smells immediately pleasant, feminine without shrieking, soft without becoming babyish, and clean without smelling like detergent. Then the problem appears with almost comic punctuality. It fades, not always instantly, not on every fabric, but often enough that the price begins to feel like a subscription to reapplying. The counter will tell you Jo Malone is designed for layering. That sounds elegant until you realize layering can also mean buying 2 bottles to make one fragrance feel finished. And that is where a polite brand becomes a very expensive habit. Maison Francis Kurkdjian is positioned as the house of luminous modern luxury, the brand women reach for when they want compliments that arrive before they do. It has polish, clarity, and a kind of architectural sparkle that makes many other perfumes seem muddy by comparison. Baccarat Rouge 540 Eau de Parfum is $325 for 70 milliliters, and by now the profile is practically a cultural event. Saffron, jasmine, amberwood, ambergris, fir resin, and cedar. Though the real experience is more abstract than the list suggests. It smells like heated sugar, mineral air, clean woods, and something metallic sweet hovering just above the skin. What it does well is diffusion. It creates a cloud that feels expensive from a distance, and strangely addictive when it catches on fabric. Now the pivot. Baccarat Rouge 540 has been copied, echoed, cloned, diluted, and chased so aggressively that its own success has made it harder to smell clearly. At $325 for 70 milliliters, you are not only buying the perfume, you are buying your way into a scent profile that the entire market has been imitating for years. The counter will call it iconic. It is. But an icon can still become overexposed, and overexposure changes the way luxury lands on the skin. Parfums de Marly is positioned as opulence without apology. Perfume for women who want rich bottles, plush compositions, and the feeling that more really is more. Delina Eau de Parfum is $375 for 75 milliliters, and its reputation is not accidental. Rhubarb, lychee, bergamot, Turkish rose, peony, lily of the valley, vanilla, musk, cashmeran, incense, and woods. The opening is tart, sparkling, and pink, in a way that feels almost tactile, like biting into chilled fruit while wearing a silk blouse. What it does well is projection with prettiness. Delina moves. It gets noticed. It has enough bite from the rhubarb to keep the rose from becoming powdery wallpaper. But the catch is that its success has made it feel less rare than the price wants it to feel. And on some women, the tart rose becomes sharper, louder, and more girlish than expected. The counter will call it feminine power. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it is a very expensive pink megaphone. And if your taste has become quieter with age, not weaker but more exacting, that distinction matters. Chanel is positioned differently from the others because Chanel does not have to beg for authority. It already has it. Women reach for Chanel because the name carries history, tailoring, discipline, and the promise that perfume can be feminine without being decorative. Chanel Coco Mademoiselle Eau de Parfum is $172 for 100 milliliters. And the structure is familiar for good reason. Orange, mandarin, orange blossom, bergamot, mimosa, jasmine, Turkish rose, ylang ylang, patchouli, white musk, vanilla, vetiver, tonka, and opopanax. It opens bright and citrus polished, then moves into a clean patchouli rose amber shape that has dressed an entire generation of women for work, dinner, divorce, promotion, and reinvention. What it does well is structure. This perfume has bones. Even if you are tired of smelling it, you cannot accuse it of being vague. The flaw is not quality. The flaw is saturation. Coco Mademoiselle is so widely worn that it can read more like a shared language than a personal signature. And for a woman who wants privacy in her scent, that matters. Still, compared with several bottles charging twice as much for half the architecture, Chanel begins to look less like the problem and more like the control sample. I put the specific bottles, sizes, and a simple wear guide in the description, so you do not have to stand at a counter pretending to enjoy being pressured. Use it as a filter before you spend money, not as a shopping list. The point is not to own more perfume, it is to be harder to fool. Before I tell you which brand came out best, here is exactly how I scored them, because longevity alone is too crude for women who actually wear perfume in real life. The first criterion was hour 4 identity, meaning whether the fragrance still has a recognizable character after the pretty opening has burned off. The second was intimacy quality, which is how the scent behaves when someone is close enough to notice you rather than your perfume. The third was price honesty, not whether a bottle is cheap, but whether the experience on skin gives back enough shape, beauty, and development for the exact price being asked. The fourth was signature risk, which is the question nobody asks at the counter. Does this perfume make you smell more like yourself, or more like a woman who bought the same idea as everyone else? The winner is Chanel Coco Mademoiselle Eau de Parfum at $172 for 100 milliliters. No hedging, no dramatic twist. Chanel wins because even with its saturation, even with all the women who have worn it before you, the formula still has what many more expensive brands are quietly failing to deliver: structure after the opening. Remember what I told you at the beginning. Luxury is not what a bottle says in the first 10 minutes. Luxury is what remains when nobody is trying to impress you anymore. At hour 4, Coco Mademoiselle still has a spine. The citrus no longer sparkles the way it did at the start, but the patchouli, rose, musk, and ambered warmth keep the perfume legible on skin. It wins on intimacy quality because it does not collapse into a vague mist or a sugary stain. It stays clean, adult, and shaped. It wins on price honesty because 100 milliliters is not modest, but compared with $405 for 50 milliliters, $475 to 75 milliliters, or 375 milliliters, it gives a woman a complete perfume rather than a beautiful argument that loses confidence halfway through. And it wins on signature risk in a complicated way. Yes, it is recognizable, but it is recognizable because it was built well, not because the market had to invent a mythology around emptiness. That matters. What sealed this for me was not nostalgia, it was comparison. When I later spoke with an independent collector who owns more niche perfume than any sane person needs, she made the same observation I had written in my notes before hearing hers. She said Chanel may not feel rare anymore, but it still behaves like perfume rather than a branding exercise. A fragrance consultant who works with private clients made a sharper point. She said many women come in asking for something exclusive, but what they actually want is something coherent, something that does not fall apart after the first compliment. That mirrored my own finding almost perfectly. Real quality survives boredom better than hype survives scrutiny. If you are buying from this group, start with Chanel Coco Mademoiselle Eau de Parfum at $172 for 100 milliliters. If you want a polished, structured, grown woman perfume that works for workdays, dinners, travel, and any situation where you want presence without shouting. It is not the most obscure choice. It is the most dependable complete one. Buy Creed Carmina at $470 for 75 milliliters, only if you specifically want a plush cherry rose entrance, and you value the Creed aura enough to accept that the dry down may not feel as distinctive as the receipt. It suits evening coats, hotel bars, and women who enjoy being dressed up by the bottle. Buy Tom Ford Lost Cherry at $405 for 50 milliliters if your priority is sensual impact in the first hour, especially for short evenings, close rooms, and moments when you want something indulgent rather than practical. Do not buy it expecting stamina to match the drama. Buy Byredo Mojave Ghost at $320 for 100 milliliters if you love airy, minimal, skin-adjacent woods, and you do not need your perfume to announce itself. It is best for women who want atmosphere more than density, but it is not the bottle I would choose if value is the question. Buy Labo Santal 33 at $335 for 100 milliliters only if you have tested it on your own skin for a full day and it does not turn sour, briny, or borrowed. It can still be handsome, but it is no longer private. Buy Jo Malone Peony and Blush Suede at 100 milliliters if you want soft, pretty, easy charm for daytime, guests, errands, or low-stakes elegance, but accept that you may need to reapply and that layering is often the business model hiding inside the aesthetic. Buy Maison Francis Kurkdjian Baccarat Rouge 540 Eau de Parfum at $325 for 70 milliliters if you still love that glowing amber saffron cloud and do not mind being surrounded by its descendants. It is powerful, but it is no longer untouched. Buy Parfums de Marly Delina Eau de Parfum at $375 for 75 milliliters if you want tart rose projection, compliments, and a pink, polished presence that refuses to sit quietly. Skip it if your taste has moved toward understatement. The larger lesson is simple. Do not pay luxury prices for a first impression if what you really want is a lasting relationship. What this test revealed is not that expensive perfume is foolish. It revealed that women with developed taste are often asked to confuse price with discernment, and those are not the same thing. Real quality does not need to flatter your insecurity, rush your decision, or make you feel unsophisticated for asking how long it lasts. It simply keeps its shape. If that is the kind of fragrance conversation you want, this is the channel you were looking for. And I want to know one specific thing from you. Which expensive perfume made you feel robbed when it vanished too soon? And was it Lost Cherry, Mojave Ghost, Santal 33, or one the counters are still pretending not to notice?